name is Mpho Matsipa, and I'm an architect, and I study cities and urbanism. I grew up in Katlehong, which is on the East Rand, and my family moved to the northern suburbs in the late 1980s, around the same time that the Influx Control Group Areas Act was repealed. So in essence, I've never really lived in the inner city. I've always lived on its periphery, first on the far east and then in the north. And it's this kind of movement between the periphery and the center and moving around the center that first inspired my interest in architecture and the spatial politics of difference. Around the time of the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was this huge demographic shift in the inner city. And historically, the inner city was understood as a white man's land. So from as early as 1924, people like Herzog had described Johannesburg as a white man's land in barbaric territory. In a way, the city was seen as a fulcrum of white colonial modernity. And there's a very long discourse about the place of Africans in the city, which is fundamentally that Africans do not belong in the city and that the urbanization and occupation of the city needs to be managed. And so you have this long colonial history that predates apartheid, which is only 1948, but that actually starts in Johannesburg in the late 19th century, where there's a lot of anxiety around managing black bodies in the city. Planning and architecture were brought into the service of maintaining these sorts of relationships, social relationships, and the role of architecture and planning was to manage these relationships spatially. In a city like Johannesburg, where rates and taxes were very low and property prices had fallen rock bottom and the city was broke, organizations or agencies like JDA, the Johannesburg Development Agency, see the increase in property values in the inner city as a good indication of development and growth. However, for inner city street traders who are increasingly pushed into smaller and smaller spaces where they can access public space, where they can conduct their business, it hasn't necessarily been that fantastic. We had the evictions in October, November, and December last year in 2013, where 6,000 street traders were displaced from the streets of inner city Johannesburg. And I think that this is part of a discourse of cleansing, right? Because gentrification is also about, in Johannesburg, or urban redevelopment is about not just a particular aesthetic effect, but also a mode of governance. If one were to expand on the concept of architectural apartheid, I would have to say it's a form of spatial violence, where social difference, or what is understood as social difference, is turned into a physical, concrete element that people have to overcome on a daily basis in order to transact their daily lives.